Progress.
Resume the recording. So here we are. Print the market analysis and net sheet, or excuse me, complete your estimated net sheet based upon your market analysis questionnaire. And what I mean by that is if they've come in and they've done updates or they've upgraded their home or things that they've done to the home that you cannot tell by tax records, that's when you're going to change your market analysis a little bit. If you go into a home that was built in, say, 2005, and now 20 years later, they had granite, now they have quartz, you're kind of looking at your analysis based upon what those sold properties were previously and trying to get as apples to apples as possible. And so now you can complete that net sheet. And again, we'll go back to that $500,000 house. They may have solds that sold at 530, 540 that had been updated with quartz and new flooring, whatever they may have. And if they've done that, now you know your $500,000 house is now a 530, 540 house. So you can do your net sheet based upon that number, based upon instead of the $500,000 value.
Can I ask a newbie question?
Absolutely.
Net sheet, because my understanding of the net sheet is what you're gonna walk away with.
Mm-hmm.
You sell it for a certain price,
Mm-hmm.
which I've been working with title companies to get to that. Is it the same thing you're talking about here?
I am. So a lot of these title companies on their websites, like I use Republic Titles.
Yeah.
So on the Republic Title site, they have a net sheet calculator on there where you can input in the seller's information, input in what you estimate the property is going to sell for, what the commissions are,
Yeah.
what the taxes are on the property, when you expect it to close, and if you're expecting a home warranty, what that cost is. If there's an HOA, it'll prorate that for you. And so what it does is it'll prorate everything, your taxes and everything, and you can take that to closing and say, based upon what the numbers I estimate to sell your home for, this is kind of what you're going to walk away from minus what you owe on the property currently.
Those pieces like that, you don't know how much they allocate.
But that pre-listing questionnaire, again, will ask that. Typically, they'll answer that for you.
Okay.
And you just say it's going to vary because every day it increases, they make their payment, and then it decreases. So I always tell them, this is just an estimate. This is not exact until we get, an actual contract offer in place. Then I can get you a more accurate number.
What you're using that Republic Title calculator?
I use Republic Titles. You can do PDFs for it. You can email it, you can print it. I always just print it off and take it with me as part of my packet.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay. So again, I print off my market analysis through CorpResent. I create a nice packet form and then the net sheet and as well. So I print my marketing packet, anything that I'm going to do for marketing wise, as far as photography and things that I've done in the past, it's kind of a resume. I'm going to give them a resume. I'm going to give them a brochure that I've done. So I'm going to put that into my packet as well. So call, text, confirm the listing appointment, and ask pre-appointment questions. Pre-appointment question is mainly, is everybody that's going to be making the decision going to be there? Because if not, we need to find a time to make sure that everybody's going to be there at the same time. Make sure that I'm going to ask them, make sure they get their survey, have their survey available. And any questions they may have, please go ahead and have those written down. Then I'm going to go to the listing appointment. You will be surprised how many times you forget to go to the listing appointment. When you get so busy that you don't look at your calendar, and your calendar, you miss the reminder to tell you you're supposed to be somewhere. I have done that. I will admit, I have been in the middle of doing something else and gotten a phone call going, aren't you supposed to be here? And I'm like, I am on my way. Luckily, I wasn't very far away, but I have gotten so busy that I've missed it. So again, just a reminder, go to your listing appointment, try to be on time, and preferably be 5 minutes early. When you're there, explain the listing agreement and information about brokerage services. Okay. It is very vitally important that they understand the listing agreement. You're going to sit down with them. You're going to bring out that paper copy. That's part of your marketing packet. And you're going to go over everything with them. Now, you may tell them, I'm going to send this to you electronically to sign once we've finalized everything, but I want you to have this for your records. Okay. So, and then explain about information about brokerage services. What is a good way to explain the IABS? Here's how I explain it. This is definitions of agency that we're required to give you by the state of Texas. This is definitions if we represent you, if we represent buyer, or we represent both parties in an intermediary status. This is not a contract, but we are required to give this to you by state law. So I always take 2 copies. I always tell them, here's a copy for you. And if you could sign this one for my record so I can have it for my compliance. And so I leave them a blank copy as well. But I tell them it's not a contract. It's just definitions of agency that we're required to give you and explains our fiduciary duties to the parties within the contract. All right. Then I explained the net sheet. Once I've talked about the market analysis and what I'm explaining, going over the house, I'm going to go over the net sheet. I'm going to talk to them about the net sheet and what it is. And again, like I said before, it's just an estimate. It could vary based upon when we close. It could vary based upon any liens that I'm not aware of that aren't in record. And so it could vary, but this is a net sheet based upon what my market analysis talks about. And again, I'll talk about the market analysis. I will talk to them about what I expect and answer any questions that they may have.
Are you paying 6% the standard?
I will say I put 3% as my standard.
They're not doing a 3% buyer side?
I explain to them the buyer's agency and let them make that decision. But I tell them my fee to list your property, market your property, and get you a contract is 3%. If you want to pay a buyer's agent, that's typical. It has been in the past paid at 3%. It is negotiable based upon the offer we receive. And if you want to do that, we can do it this way. But my fee is 3%. So that's typically how I'm going about the explanation of it right now. Now, I can go into more details about buyer's agents don't work for free. And typically the buyer can't afford another percentage to pay. And we do get buyers that come in that want to be unrepresented. And if that's the case, that's absolutely fine. They will not be represented and I will not represent them. But if they do, then my fee is X to do that. Okay. Complete the listing agreement based upon the seller's goals and have initials assigned, or send via email for electronic signature. I like to send mine by email. I send it for electronic signature, comes back into my documents through my transaction system, so I have everything and I'm not having to worry about uploading or missing a form or something along those lines. Have the seller complete the seller's disclosure, initial and signed, or send via Seller Shield. I send it through Seller Shield every time. Is everybody familiar with what Seller Shield is?
Heard of it, heard it's great, I've never used it.
Okay. Seller Shield is a free service. It is provided by the Texas Association of Realtors. It is a website, sellershield.com. And what it does is you put in your client's information, basically their name, their email address, and it'll ask you how many parties there are to the agreement, or excuse me, to the disclosure. It'll email them to both parties. The main party will fill it out. It gives them insurance if they request it in case that they fill it out incorrectly. So it gives them insurance up to, I believe it's $20,000 of insurance for a fee. Typically, I believe it's $200, something along those lines, but they have to pay for that insurance. But I always tell them there is a free option as well. If you choose not to get the insurance and just say, no, I decline, and then you can fill it out and it'll come back to me. And what it does is it asks them questions about their house as they fill it out. Was your house built before 1978? Yes or no? If yes, it adds in your lead-based paint addendum. If do you have an on-site septic? If yes, it adds in the sewer. So again, it'll add in those forms as they answer the questions. And if they answer a question, yes, there's been on-site flooding, they'll have a space where they can fill everything out. And so again, it comes back to us. It is a nice, complete there's no hand scratch or anything on it. They sign it all electronically. And again, this is what I use. You're free to use whatever you want. If you want to send it to them through Dotloop, you can, but this is just easier for us. Okay.
So when you get it back through Solar Shield, you download and upload it into Dotloop?
Upload it into Dotloop and I upload it into the MLS. And we'll talk about that in a little bit too. Then I have them complete a utility cost sheet. And so there's a form in there as well that we have that I've got in there that is for utilities. So it tells me, what are your utility costs? Because what's your average for 12 months? And so we can get that, upload that again into the MLS. And so a buyer can have that information, especially if it is a home that is very energy efficient. We definitely want that. We want to promote that as a buying feature for the property. And so we'll have that utility cost sheet in there. So have them complete that. And if you don't want to upload it, just have it for your records in case you're asked for it. You know, if you've got a home that, again, I say built in 2005, may not be as energy efficient as today's homes, but at least you have that in your records when they ask for it.
So I missed that. Is that in the same website you were just talking about, Seller Shield, or is that in Dotloop?
No, that's actually, that form is actually in the Google Drive in that folder. It should be in there. And if not, let me know and I'll get it uploaded, but it should be in the Google Drive. Next, I'm going to go over the showing service and how appointments will be communicated to the sellers. So we're going to go over Broker Bay or Showing Time or whatever you use. We're going to talk about what's best for them for appointments. Some people, especially if somebody works out of the home, they're going to require a notice. They're required at least an hour, sometimes 2-hour notice. And I explained to them, and I've had somebody tell me, well, I can't have anybody before 1 o'clock. All right, I can make that unavailable during that time, but it may push a buyer or two away. Can you do this instead? Can you do a notice of 1 hour and 2 hours so you can possibly get off your conference call or schedule something at another time? And typically that'll work because most buyers agents these days don't just pull up in front of a house and say, hey, I'm in front of the house. Can I show your home? Typically doesn't happen. Now, vacant, that's a go and show. We'll set up and we'll tell them, we'll set it up as a go and show, auto-enable confirmation. You'll get notice when somebody's showing the property, and we'll go over all that information for them and talk to them about feedback as well. Very important. There was a lawsuit, and we'll talk about this real quick. There was a lawsuit, I believe, in California, Colorado, Washington, one of those states, that a buyer sued because their agent submitted feedback that they thought the house was overpriced. It wasn't a great house. They submitted the feedback, ticked off the sellers, and the buyer ended up putting in an offer. The seller saw who was submitting the offer from that buyer's agent and said, well, screw you. I want full price. So they ended up having to pay more to get the house. Well, the buyer and the seller ended up talking after closing, and the seller found out why, or excuse me, the buyer found out why that they did that, and then turned around and sued their agent. So we will talk about feedback. We will talk about opinions and why people give the opinions that they do. We will tell them sometimes they're trying to just get you down. Sometimes that's the way the buyer feels. Sometimes they're going to say, well, they didn't like the location of the house because it backs up to a street. You knew that coming over to see the house. We can't change that. So sometimes you just have to brush things aside. So again, we will talk about showing service, appointments, feedback, all that kind of good stuff. Next, let's see what we're going to order photography, media, and room measurements. I have a professional do that. I have someone come in and do my room measurements for me. I do not want to be that person that's sitting there either with a ruler or with a laser doing that. I have my photographer do it. And they'll do my floor plan and everything at one time.
You say your photographer does that?
Uh-huh. Yep. So I'll order my photography, any videos that I want, drones, any of that kind of stuff, and my room measurements all at the same time. I'm going to get the survey from the seller and I'm going to upload it to the transaction system. Place the sign in the yard, key box on the door. I am going to take a little bit of media that I may take myself, and I'm going to create a coming soon. Or I may take a blurred photo and say coming soon. And just because I want to generate, and when I go in my listing appointment, I talk to them about pre-marketing. I want to pre-market your home. I want to market it before we go active, and I want to try to generate a little bit of interest. I want to give some information, but not all information. I may give them an address, but I'm not going to tell them a price. I want them to ask me about a price. I want to generate just a little bit and give a little nugget here and there about what we've got coming, especially if it's in a market where there may not be a lot of inventory and somebody might be waiting. So I want to generate some interest coming in before we actually go live. So I'll create that coming soon in MLS. I'll create the coming soon social media pieces. Once I get my photography back, I'm going to upload it to the MLS and my social media platforms. I'm going to put it onto Facebook. I'm going to put it onto TikTok. I'm going to create Instagram, wherever I can to generate a little bit of interest in anywhere that I can. And I tell them, my job is to get eyeballs on your home, anywhere, anyhow. And so I'm going to create those pieces. Then once I have everything in place, I'm going to activate the listing. I'm going to upload that completed seller's disclosure to MLS, upload the property survey, upload offer instructions. I have a offer instruction sheet that talks about submit all offers to this email address. Please send to this title company. Please do this, and this depends upon what the home has. But I'm going to request that information. I'm going to request that they submit it to my people. They may or they may not, but I'm going to put it out there that I've got my people in place. And again, when we go to that listing presentation, when I talk about them, this is part of it. I'm going to tell them I've got a set of closing instructions that I'm going to give them, from my preferred vendors. So put that in place. Upload the completed utility cost sheet to MLS. Again, you may or may not choose to do this. If I get the floor plan back from my photographer, I may or may not upload it to the MLS. It depends on how much information I want to give. Okay. If it's a floor plan that I think is, it's an attractive floor plan, then I will. If it is a floor plan, especially for a home that's upper values, typically 5 bedrooms or more, people want to see what that floor plan is. They want to know if there's a mother-in-law suite. They want to know how it's laid out. And so I will put that information there. If it's a floor plan that I think it's kind of a funky floor plan, I may not, because I may be giving away too much information. The more information you give makes somebody go, well, I've got everything that I need. I don't need to go see the house. So I'll leave that up to you, whether you want to do that or not. But I would probably say it's about 50-50 whether I upload the floor plans or not. Okay. And if it's a newer construction home, I always do, because people know floor plans. Del Webb, for example, in Trinity Falls, I've got 2 properties, and every time I go over there, they go, what floor plan is this? I'll say, well, this one is the Martin Ray. Oh yeah, the Martin Ray plan's got this, this, and this. They know floor plans. So I'll upload the floor plans with any changes that may have been done to the property. Then I'm going to send the MLS listing to the seller to verify the accuracy. I want them to see what I have put out there. And if they want me to change something, let me know. I want their approval on it, because I don't want them coming back to me later on going, well, if you would have done this instead or said this instead, it may be different. Well, I sent this to you based upon what I felt. And if you didn't like this, you could have told me and I would have made the change. It doesn't take much to change this. Or if I look up school records and school records have changed and it's a different school now, well, let me know. I'm going based upon what the ISD says. So again, I'm going to send this to them to verify accuracy. And then I'm going to go to the showing service and I'm going to put in instructions. So I'll go to Broker Bay or Showing Time and I'll put in the instructions based upon their email addresses, text for, the cell numbers for text, anything along those lines, any special, there's an alarm code, anything along those lines, I'll put that into the showing service at that time. Then I'm going to create the just listed media pieces and social media for the social media platforms. I'm going to take some of my assets that I get, and I might go out and create something on my own, whether it's on Canva or Deluxe or one of these sites. I use different sites for different pieces, but I'll create those pieces at that time. And then I'll put it out there. We're active, we're ready to go. And then I boost the just listed advertising. So once that advertising is created in KV Core, I boost it. I want it out there right away because I know that's the maximum number of hits I'm going to get is that first week. And so I want it out there for a week of advertising, $60, $65, whatever it is, it's worth it to me. And through those boost advertising, typically I'll get 7 to 10 people. And it's worth it because I know that those are actual shoppers. Now, here's a little tip for you. If you boost your advertising and you get a response back and you get a cell phone number, for those of you who use Forewarn, take that cell phone number and put it into Forewarn. At that point, you can tell everything about that buyer. You can tell where they live. You can tell how old they are, how long they lived in the home. You can tell kind of by their address if they're a shopper for your home or they're just browsing and looking at information. So I use Forewarn, and I do that when I get somebody in. I'll go in and find out about them because I want to know, is that person an actual viable buyer, or are they just looking? So Forewarn is it costs $18 a month to do, and what it is how's a good way to put it? It can tell you, I can put in your cell phone number into Forewarn, and I can tell how long you've lived at your house, how many cars you've had, if you've got any criminal record. I can tell if you've gotten tickets. It tells me all the information. And so it is really good for working with buyers. If you get a buyer, and especially I tell ladies, please get Forewarn, because I can't tell you the number of times I've heard of an agent going somewhere and having a sketchy buyer come into place. And they can put their number in there, find out all about that buyer, find out how many times they've been arrested, what they've been arrested for, and you can kind of say, no, I'm not doing that. We had one agent that showed a property in Garland and pulled up the Forewarn, and the person had been arrested 43 times. And it wasn't just, minor stuff. It was like assault, sexual assault, all different types. So it is well worth it. So if you want Forewarn, please let me know and I can sign you up for it. Then I'm going to schedule the open house in MLS. I try to do that on the first weekend. And when I go into my listing presentation, and we'll talk about listing presentation at a different time, but when I go into my listing presentation, here is my spiel, whatever you want to call it, is I go into that listing presentation and I tell them, I want to get the photography back, typically first part of the week. I want it done on Monday, and hopefully back by Tuesday, Wednesday at the very latest, so I can start my pre-marketing. I would like to go on the market Thursday afternoon or Friday morning, and at that time, schedule the open house. We'll already do some pre-marketing for your open house, but at that time, I can actually schedule the open house on MLS, on Zillow, Realtor.com, etc., so everybody knows that it will be available. But that first weekend is the best weekend. That's when people typically are going to come out the first time. So I'm going to schedule that open house the first weekend. Then I'm going to advertise that open house on social media platforms. And then every Monday there on out, I'm going to send updates on the market, showings, and that's if not under contract. So this is the checklist that I use currently if a property is not under contract. So what we're going to look at now is I'm going to go here. And next we're going to do the listing contract to closing checklist. Make sure we see that one just fine. Yeah, I think that should be there. All right. So now we've got our listing. Now we have our actual offer. And you'll see I have contract offer here. I don't have contract, I have contract offer. Because it is an offer to contract. It is not a contract until it's executed. So just a little semantics there. So I'm going to get the offer in and I'm going to look it over for completeness and accuracy. I want to make sure everything is filled out. I want to know all the details. I want to receive that pre-approval letter and proof of funds. So I will tell you something that happened just last week. Had a buyer come through and said, I want to buy a home, single family home, first red flag. I want to buy a single family home for cash. I want a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, and I want to spend anywhere from 1 million to 1.2 million. My big red flag was when you say single family home, that's a red flag to me. So if you say house, home, when you start detailing out single family, that means that it's typically going to be a scam. So I told the agent, I said, before we go out looking at homes or sending this person homes or even responding back to them, let's get a proof of funds. So we got a proof of funds. And it was a letter from Chase Bank. And it said, this person has $5 million, 5 point something million dollars in the bank. And their funds are good. And it Chase letterhead, Chase logo. At the bottom, it had this guy's signature from Chase Bank and a telephone number. And it looked like a very nice letter. I called up Chase Bank. I said, look, I got this letter and it shows proof of funds from a buyer, and I need to verify whether this person actually has an account. So let me go back 1 second. This person's name was Allen, Allen, Nicholsburg. What's the last name? And it was a woman. Allen was a woman. My other red flag. So I called up Chase. Chase goes, can you give me that person's name? Gave him that person's name. They looked it up. Nope. Don't have that person anywhere that has an account with Chase. And I said, okay, it's signed by this guy. I told the banker's name at the bottom. They said, okay, let me look him up in the directory and see if I can find that person's name. Looked him up. Nope. That person does not work for Chase Bank. I said, all right, thank you very much. So I am going to get those proof of funds in. I'm going to look at them and I'm going to verify, especially if I think that there's something scammy. I'm going to verify that form. So once I've gotten everything, I'm comfortable with everything, I'm going to complete the net sheet based upon the offer. I'm going to upload the offer, the pre-approval letter, proof of funds, and net sheet to the transaction system. I'm going to contact the seller and I'm going to send the offer and the net sheet to the client. Okay. Now, if I get multiple offers, I'm going to do it all. I'm going to do it separate times and I'm going to label it separate. 525 offer, 530 offer, Jones offer, Jackson offer, Smith offer, whatever, but I'm going to label it differently so I know which one that we're discussing when we're having these conversations. So once I send everything to them, I'm going to review the details of the contract and any related addendum with the seller and any changes to be negotiated. So we're going to go through the offer and we're going to discuss it. Now, depends upon your seller. Some sellers may want you to be in person. So when are you going to come over so we can talk about it? Okay. I'll schedule the time. Let's go talk about it. Sometimes I can do it by Zoom. And I'll say, you know, I can pull it up by Zoom. We can go over everything line by line. And it's just easier that way. I can do it right now. So it just depends. But We're going to review everything and any changes that are being negotiated. So now, once all parties are in agreement, I'm going to send to the seller to execute. Now, let's talk about today's market for right now. And I was actually thinking about this on the way to the office this morning. Today's market, we get a lot of buyers that are coming in going, I don't have representation and I don't want representation. So who writes up the offer at that point? Typically, it's the buyer's agent. So who writes up the offer? Anybody?
What do you do?
Here's my thought. It is the buyer's offer to contract. Buyer needs to write it up. You're not doing that job. You have a fiduciary duty to your seller, not to the buyer. If they do not want representation, they write up the offer. If they do not put in an option period, they didn't want representation. Now, you'll get some buyers that are going to push back and go, well, I don't know how to do this. Get an attorney. Hire an attorney, hire a realtor. That's what we're here for. It's the reason we got an education, got a license. You know, it's the reason why we have the experience to do this. So again, to me, it's the buyer's responsibility to write up that offer. Now, you may tell them, you know what, you're going to need a financing addendum. You're going to need an HOA addendum. You're going to need, these are the forms you're going to need. You can get these on the TREC website because they can. And you may send them to TREC to get those forms. Or you can say, you know what, you can talk to a title company and they can tell you what you're going to need. So then I'm going to change the listing once we've executed. I'm going to change the listing in MLS to active option to match the date on the contract, or change it pending, whichever one, but typically it's going to be active option. I'm going to receive the initial and signed seller disclosure from the buyer's agent, and I'm going to upload that into my transaction system. Then I'm going to verify that the buyer received the property survey that I uploaded from the MLS. Now, there is a change coming to the contract where the survey affidavit is no longer going to be required. Thank heavens. So that's the reason why I do not have that in here. But I'm going to verify that they have received that survey within the time period that they have on that contract. Then I'm going to send the executed contract, survey, and addendum to the designated title company. And hopefully it is the one that I put in those instructions. But I am going to send all that information over to the title company as soon as it's executed. So again, while this is not in an exact timeline, this is all done about the same time period. And so I'm going to make sure all this stuff is done. I'm going to send this to the title company because I want them to open title, because that's when my timeline starts for that 72 hours. Okay. I know it's when the date of execution. I want the title company to have that as well, so they have a matched up timeline and there's no disagreement there. Then I'm going to send the title company my seller's contact information. I want them to have my seller's contact information so they can tell my seller, okay, based upon the timeline, you need to contact your HOA, you need to order the HOA docs, here's their link, here's their payment link, and I'm going to get the title company all that information so they can get started on their process right there. Then I'm going to review areas that the inspector will need access to and prepare the seller for the inspection. And what I mean by that is I'm going to tell them, make sure things are removed from in front of your breaker box. If you have a breaker box in front of a closet, make sure that it's out of the way. All your clothes are moved out of the way and they have access to it, or they will not move it and they will want to come back and review it. If it's in your garage, make sure all your items are moved from in front of your garage. Second. Yes, you can represent the seller and the buyer at the same time. Please talk to me before you do so. That is called intermediary, and there are special rules that go in place when you do represent the buyer and the seller at the same time. But when we go to prepare for the inspection, I'm going to tell them, first off, make sure all your light bulbs are working. Make sure that if you have any running toilets, change out the flappers, change out the guts of your toilet beforehand. Just simple stuff. If you've got a leaking faucet, try to get it repaired. If you've got a sprinkler head that is broken, try to get that fixed. Because they're going to flag all this stuff. Their job is to find everything. And when they see it and you have a light bulb that's out, they're going to say, we have a light fixture that is not working, not a light bulb that's not working, a light fixture that is not working. And we need a professional electrician to come out and check your light fixture. And when it's a simple 50-cent light
Well,
bulb.
there's a joke in there somewhere.
Yeah. But you would think that sellers would know this, but they typically don't, because they typically are blind to things within their home. And so I do have a checklist as well. I probably haven't uploaded yet of things to go through with sellers to go through on their home, as far as checking your light bulbs, checking your faucets, checking your plugs, simple things like that.
So do you address it at this point? Well, why wouldn't you address that when you first have the listing? Like, because you know it's coming.
You can.
Okay.
You can. I typically do it both times. And especially when I am walking a house during a listing presentation,
Yeah.
I'll turn on the lights, and if I see like a white light versus a daylight bulb, and I see different bulbs, I'll tell them we need to change those out and get the same bulb.
Yeah.
Because once they see different light bulbs, it just looks funky. It'll come off funky in photos and it'll throw buyers off. So we want to make sure the home looks taken care of. So I'll go over typically twice with them on that kind of stuff. I'm going to receive the receipted earnest money and option money page from the title company once they receive it, and upload it to the transaction management system. Now I'm going to review any amendment for requested repairs with the seller. And I want the amendment. I do not want the inspection report. And I tell the other agent, if you want to send me pages related to the amendment, that's fine. Please don't send me the whole thing. So, I do not want the whole inspection report. I'll talk to you about this more on. Go ahead.
Why is that, Chris? They don't want the whole thing?
Because I don't want the whole thing, because once I receive that inspection report, I now have to disclose everything to a new buyer if this deal falls out. Okay. So say, for example, there is a disposal that's not working that was found by the inspector, but they didn't ask for it. I now have to disclose that there is now a problem here. Okay. So I don't want that inspection report. I'll take the pages related to what the amendment has, but I don't want the whole thing. Because again,
now you have knowledge.
Now you have knowledge. Now, here's the thing too. If they email you that inspection report and you do not open it, it is still designated that you have received and read that report, whether you open it or not. So you can't say, well, I never opened it up. That's not an excuse. You received it. Now you have knowledge. So again, now at that point, you have to disclose. Negotiate repairs before the end of the option period deadline. Okay. I cannot tell you how many times I've had people go, well, we're in the middle of negotiations and option ends today at 5 o'clock. So we're in the middle of it. So we'll just keep negotiating. No, it has to be done by 5 o'clock, or you have to extend that option period. There is no, we're in the middle of negotiations. 5 o'clock is that deadline. Drop dead. If you can't come to an agreement and your seller is like MIA, they can sit there and go, you know what? The buyer can go, we're terminating, and walk away at that point. Now, if your buyer goes MIA, which, believe it or not, I had this pop up because the buyer was at a funeral this past week, and they were in the middle of an amendment, and all of a sudden the buyer can't be contacted. I told the agent, I said, you've got to extend the option. You've got 10 minutes to extend your option period to get in contact with them. And you've just got to get another 24 hours, something, so you can get in contact with them, because you're not done yet. Because if it's not agreed upon and that option period hits, now they're stuck. There is no out. So make sure you get all that stuff done in time.
I've heard that some listing agents will do their own inspections before.
Yeah.
Is that recommended at all?
Well, here's it. I've done that. And you'll get some inspectors that will say, I highly recommend you do not do that. And you'll get some that say, okay, sure. Because once you have knowledge of everything that's on that disclosure, if they don't, or that is report, and they do not fix it, at that point, you have to disclose it. And you have to give that report to a buyer's agent. Okay, so you have to disclose everything that's on there. Okay, because if they get that done, now they have something that a buyer can look at and go, well, they didn't fix this and I want this fixed, or they can go through everything at that point. And again, the buyer can get their own inspection done. And I will tell you, you can get 10 inspectors to inspect a home and you'll get 10 different inspections. Okay. Change the listing in MLS to active contingent or pending. You do pending if it's cash, or active contingent if there is financing in place, because now it is contingent upon the financing. Okay. What happens, and here's kind of a trick question, what happens if you change your listing from active option to pending? What happens in the MLS? And what happens in Zillow and Realtor.com? It goes away. It disappears off of those syndicated sites. So once you change it to pending on Zillow and Realtor.com, it's off. It is no longer there and it's no longer visible. If it's active contingent, it is still visible on those sites. So you might still get inquiries. And so that's the reason why I move it to active contingent, because it is contingent upon financing. Now, once that financing date, whether it's 15 days, 18 days, whatever you've negotiated, at that point, you can move it to pending. Okay. Also, just by rules, you have 72 hours to make changes in MLS. 72 hours. So if you've gone active, within 72 hours, you have to move it to active option. Once you've gone to contingent, you have 72 hours to move to contingent. Okay. All right. Once repairs are done, upload any receipts for the repairs from the seller and send to the buyer's agent. Send those completed repairs to the buyer's agent. Notify the seller when the appraiser is coming to the property. And this is something that I do. I schedule cleaners for my homes. So when I do a listing, I'll get it professionally cleaned before closing, because I want that buyer walking in to a clean home, not coming back going, well, they left this, this, and this, and it was dirty. And I want my cleaners to clean the home.
So you're not asking your seller to do that, you're doing that yourself.
I'll do it myself. And that's,
Pay for that?
yep. That's part of what my thing is I'll tell them, say, look, you know what? I'll have cleaners clean your home at the end of the contract, make sure that the buyer's coming into a clean property. We just need to make sure that you're out. You know, we have plenty of time to get that done.
How
So
much that one cost? I know the inside of the house.
it typically is $300 to $500. And it depends, honestly, depends on the sellers. So sometimes, you know, but I'll tell them, you know, and typically they'll work with me. And so they know. All right, then I'm going to schedule the closing time with the title company. So I'm going to get with my sellers and say, when's the best time for you to close? Mornings, afternoons, are you just whenever? Or do we have to do a mobile closing and get a mobile notary to you? So I'm going to schedule the time with the title company. I'm going to send all the documents to compliance along with the completed CDA. Now I'm going to send that calendar invite with the closing time to the sellers once we've got everything confirmed. And then I'm going to review the closing disclosure from the title company for accuracy. We had one just a couple of weeks ago that the title company put in, and the listing agent said, I'm getting paid 2.5%. And so we're paying the buyer's agent 2.5%. Buyer's agent, this was within office. Buyer's agent called me up, said, he lied to me. Closing disclosure says he's getting 3%, and I'm only getting 2.5%. He said he was only getting 2.5%. I said, that doesn't sound right, but let me check on it. So I looked, before I made any phone calls, I got into Dotloop. I pulled up the listing agreement, and sure enough, it said 2.5%. Then I went, you know what? That title company assumed he was getting 3%. So I called her back and I said, listing agreement only says 2.5%. Contract only says 2.5%. His CDA only says 2.5%. So I bet the title company just put that in on an assumption. She called up title company. Sure enough, that's what had happened. So I'm going to review that for accuracy before I send it to anybody. Then I'm going to verify with my sellers that they received the closing disclosure, and if there's any questions. I'm going to answer any questions the best I can. Why is the HOA have this fee on here? Or why is there a proration here? Or whatever questions they may have, I'm going to make sure everything is as accurate as possible, and that I can answer those questions. If not, I'm going to tell them, you know what, that's a good question. Let me find out for you, because that's my job. I want to find out. I'm going to order a closing gift. Then I'm going to go to the house and I'm going to take the lockbox off the door, take the sign out of the yard. Then I'm going to attend the closing with the sellers. It's on my calendar. It's an important day. They're hopefully going to be happy. Once title closes and funds the transaction, I'm going to move the MLS listing to sold. And then I'm going to send the seller a request for a review. Review my services. Be as honest as possible. I want you to be honest. I know everything is not always perfect, and I don't want you to give me 5 stars if it wasn't 5 stars. But my job is to try to exceed expectations, and I hope we did that. Now, I know not every transaction is going to be perfect, and my job is to try to take some emotion out of it, but I want to ask for that review so you can be honest to the public. And so hopefully somebody else will want to use my services, and hopefully you'll, give me a recommendation or referral to one of your friends.
Are you sending them like a Google link, or how are you doing that?
Typically I will send that through, I'll send that through KV Corp. They have a request for a review. And so I'll send it from there, because I want that as much as possible. That's a big thing these days. And so I'll take that and then I'll put it onto Google, and I'll put it on, wherever. I'm looking at a couple of different systems. There's Rate My Agent. There's a couple of different systems that you can use. So I'm asking for that. So that is typically what my list. And again, there's things that you can add in here, things that you can take out. Whatever you do that you're more comfortable doing. I wanted to do this because I wanted you to have, again, systems in place, and I wanted you to be able to give something like this to your sellers when you sit down with them. Make this part of your listing packet so they know exactly what to expect from you, what you're going to be doing, and you're just not sitting there twiddling your thumbs waiting for a contract to come through. Okay, so I want them to see value. I want you to be able to give them value. So, any questions or anything? Okay, so I did have a question regarding intermediary. Let me go back to that real quick. You as an agent can be an intermediary for a buyer and the seller, but once you become an intermediary, you cannot give advice. You can only give honest opinions on something, but you cannot give, you can give details, but you cannot give advice on, yeah, they'll take $50,000 off the price of the house. You can't give them any information that would put the other party at risk.
You can't say things like they're motivated.
Yeah. All I can tell is put in your best offer, put in the offer that you're comfortable with.
It's just informational.
Just informational at that point. Because if you give anything that could put the other party at risk, you're breaching your fiduciary duty to that party, and you can be sued. You can be. And so I typically tell, especially newer agents, do not be an intermediary yet between two parties. If we need to appoint another agent to the other party, we can, and we will. And you can get a referral for that appointment, but let's get you through this first, and let's get a couple of transactions under your belt before you do it. So if you're going to do an intermediary, please come to me first and talk to me about it. So any other questions on anything?
No, I do want forewarn. So do I just sign up, or do I tell you? Or?
Just let me know. And what I'll do is after this, I'll get on there and I'll send you a link for forewarn, and I'll tell Tracy, because she'll put it on, just put it on your office bill.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. So like I said, forewarn's great. I don't, and it's an app for your phone. So I just plug it in my phone and I get phone calls all day long. And what I do is if I don't know the number, I'll put it in forewarn and tell me if somebody comes up.
Is it unlimited? You just do as many searches as you want?
Many as you want.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll look at numbers all the time and sometimes it comes back with somebody and sometimes it doesn't. Most time, if it doesn't, it's a spam call.
Yeah.
But if it's a legitimate, then I know. I know if an agent's calling me, I'll have their information. Or if it's, somebody calling me that I don't know, I always put it in there. Because I want to know who I'm talking to. Especially if you've got a lease home or something along those lines. I want to know who I'm talking to. I want to know their criminal record. So, all right. I thank you all for attending. And again, this is all in the hub. If you have any questions on it, let me know. We'll be adding more documents in there later on.
Chris, is that linked to the Google Drive somewhere on our office page?
It is in